Welcome, everyone. Okay, well, we could go ahead and get started. We still have a couple people shuffling in, but welcome, everyone. It's nice to see you all this evening. We have a very exciting virtual learning session today with a couple of different Chef and Foundation staffs as our speakers. So we could go ahead and get started. We'll be talking about farm to school today. As usual, apprentices, if you're able to turn on your camera, please do so if you can't understand as well. And then if you could just put your name and then your school district in the chat for our speakers, that'd be great. But otherwise, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about farm to school, and I'm just going to pass it to our first speaker, Patrick, if you want to introduce yourself, and we could go ahead and get started.
Sure thing. Happy to be with everyone today. My name is Patrick Keneally. I'm a senior school food operations specialist with the Chef Am Foundation. I live in upstate New York, so it's getting into the evening on my coast. Um, but prior to joining Chef Am Foundation, I was a school lunch director in New York, was also their public policy and legislative chair, and local foods and farm to school are near and dear to my heart. It was one of my main focuses when I was a director. I was lucky enough to win two different awards with New York State Agriculture and Markets as my time as a director for farm to school barbecues and my local procurement efforts. So excited to talk with you guys today about this. If you want to share the presentation, I'll get going.
Awesome. I'm gonna share my screen.
Perfect. So as I said, we're going to talk about building a foundation for the use of local foods in your programs today. And like I said, I'm Patrick Keneally. So what is local procurement? The definition of local can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But the broad definition, it's typically within a state or a regional boundary. Especially the definition of local goes more if your state happens to have like purchasing incentives. In New York, we had a purchasing incentive. So if we spent so much money on New York food, we actually got a higher reimbursement rate at lunch. And I struggled with this when we talk about regional boundaries. Two of the school districts I managed were actually right on the New York-Vermont border. So oftentimes I could get fresher local produce from Vermont than I could from some of my vendors in New York. So the term local, it's kind of like, what does it mean to your district? What does it mean to your purveyors? But then we talk about hyperlocal, grown and produced within your district. And I had some situations where I was able to purchase from farmers where the kids went to my school districts, and it was really a great way to boost your local economy. But the benefits to procuring local foods are your foods are going to be fresher. They're spending less time on a truck. Most oftentimes, they're harvested within days of being delivered to you. You're supporting your local economy. There's educational tie-ins where you can expand, outside of your kitchen into your cafeteria with educational activities and even engage the whole school community in efforts there. And overall, using local procurement to really strengthen the school community relationship. Later, we're going to talk about some ways to implement farm to school and tying your cafeteria and your classroom and your community all together is really a great way to achieve that. Next slide. So when you start talking about local food, you kind of want to find out what the current picture in your own home district looks like. Oftentimes you're already procuring some local items, whether it be local milk, that's the big one that a lot of schools do. Um, Take kind of a assessment of your own program and start to identify areas where you can um, start to purchase more local. A great way is, transitioning away from canned fruit to use more whole fruit. Um, Look at, do you have access to additional local products through your existing contracts? Oftentimes your broadliner, they might not denote it on the order guides, but a lot of times there are some products that could be local to your area. So reaching out to your broadliners to get more product specifications and finding out, are there items that you have access to without doing any research, that are already in your order guides, but you just didn't know they were local. Can you increase your local spend on products through the DoD Fresh program? Um, Oftentimes, they're awarded, the contractors who are awarded the bids, and those are encouraged to source local products for the DoD Fresh program. So that's an easy way that you could, take some of your money away from the brown box commodity items and put it to more fresh ingredients. And then outside of your current contracts and vendors, do you have access to local products near your district? Are there food hubs nearby that you're currently not working with? Um, you know, Old fashioned going door to door, soliciting with local farms to find out if they have the capacity to work with you. These are all ways that you can evaluate your current picture, so you can start building an increased local procurement program. Next slide. So as I said, you kind of want to create a baseline, identify your current local spend. So looking at your order guides, velocity reports from vendors, your monthly inventory, kind of giving yourself a baseline of a barometer of, okay, we're currently spending 2.5 to 3% of our food budget on local items. Um, Oftentimes, state agriculture departments have tracking tools that you can use to track your local spend. And this is a great place to start with because it gives you a roadmap of how you can move forward. Next slide. So like I said, the easiest thing you can do is to start identifying easily accessible local products and looking through the catalog that's available to you through the DoD Fresh program is a great way to be able to source local ingredients. And then looking at your current vendor, whether it's your milk, dairy products, your grocery, and your produce vendors. Um, and it's a great time to take advantage of some of the USDA changes in the final rule that starts to let you use terms like local and geographic preference in your bid solicitations so that you can have access to the products you want to see on your bids. Next slide. So then what you want to do, once you've created your baseline, you want to set goals, you want to monitor them, and you want to expand upon them. One great thing you can do is in, your wellness plan for your school district, you can put the threshold you like to get to into that wellness policy. So it shows your commitment to getting to establish goals. So you establish your accurate baseline, develop how you're going to monitor your increase. And that's, you're going to track your invoices, you're going to ask for quarterly, biannual, or annual velocity reports. You're going to be conducting inventories, and then you're going to want to go back to your goals and review your progress. And it's great to, you're going to learn a lot about, financial management of your program. So it's great to, when you do set these goals, put actual dollar values to it so you know financially how you're going to get there. So if your goal is to get from 2.5% of purchasing to 5% local purchasing, look at what your total spend on your products is going to be for that year. Calculate your 5% so you can really map out through the course of the school year how you're financially going to reach those goals you've set. Next slide. So when, we're going to start procuring local, we really got to, there's a lot more planning involved in using more fresh, non-processed ingredients in our programs rather than using, processed products. Next slide. So how we're going to plan for our local procurement, we're going to follow a very rigid, structured procurement cycle. You're going to want to implement cycle menus and salad bars. Is you're going to want to forecast your product usage, and you're going to want to figure out your budget for your local items and how you're going to mix those into your cycle menus. And we're going to expand upon all of these right now. So next slide. So what is a procurement cycle? This gives you a visual look at what our values aligned procurement cycle is at CAF. It's an ongoing process. You start with step one with your menu planning and forecasting, and you work through all the sequential steps to really make sure that you're planning for the right amounts, the right usage, so you can be a good steward of your district's finances. And we'll go to the next slide. We'll go into each step by step. So this is the procurement cycle broken down so you can see it a little easier. Step one is your menu planning and forecasting. Step two, you're going to identify your sources for your values aligned local products and set up your strategy. You're going to draft your solicitations. You're going to order your USDA foods, and that's the great time when you decide how much you're going to put into your DoD Fresh program. Then you're going to be publicizing your solicitations, accept and evaluate the solicitations, award your contracts, and then it starts going. And we're back at the beginning. You prepare for your next school year, and through the whole thing is you're managing your contracts to make sure that your vendors are adhering to the standards that you set. And this is a great tool because it gives you structure, so you know the process. It's repetitive. It becomes, second nature as you go through this process. And the real key, the biggest stepping stone, is setting up your menu planning and your forecasting. Next slide. So when we're doing our menu planning and forecasting, we really need to be implementing cycle menus into our programs. Next slide. The cycle menu or recommended cycle menus are going to be 2 to 3 week cycle for a breakfast program and a 4 to week cycle for your lunch program. Next slide. So the benefits to a cycle menu are your popular items are going to be able to repeat themselves 2 to 3 times during a cycle. You can even implement them weekly if you want, but it gives you a good chance to work in your favorites while having other items show up sporadically through your 6-week cycle. It gives you the opportunity to menu unique items that possibly could be more expensive. This 5 to 6 week cycle doesn't look the same in every calendar based on using a 6-week cycle. So it doesn't look repetitive when you put out your monthly menu. And it helps keep your inventory at a minimum. And another benefit too is as things repeat through the cycle, your team gets more used to preparing that item and your efficiencies only increase as you move through your cycle. Next slide. And why do you take a full year approach at looking at your cycle menu? Because you're going to know exactly how many times an item hits your menu. So it helps you with planning your USDA foods and moving money into favors. You know exactly how much you need to purchase and when. It allows you to weigh more expensive items versus less expensive items. Because when you know exactly how many times, say, a chicken quesadilla is going to hit your menu, you know exactly how many pounds of chicken you're going to need. So maybe you can make the decision, I no longer am going to order brown box diced chicken. I'm going to get a locally sourced chicken thigh and braise my own chicken for my quesadillas. And the only way you can really make those strong financial decisions is by really forecasting out your usage. And it provides a framework for the systems change through procurement, training, and production. So as you keep moving through that production cycle, the procurement cycle, you get more and more better data as you move forward with your forecasting. Next slide. So how do we want to connect local foods to our cycle menu? You really want to plan out your local items well in advance. When you're using food hubs, you need to communicate with them so that they can source the items that you're going to need for you. If you're going direct to a farmer, oftentimes, they have different delivery schedules that you might have to accommodate. They have different minimums. You really have to it's a great way to build a strong partnership and be flexible. And the more you can plan in advance, the more flexibility you can provide to that farmer to support them. By using a cycle menu, you can align local products to their growing season. So you're using them when they're at their peak freshness. Um, the cycle menu allows you to forecast the volume you need to communicate with your farmers. And when you're planning in advance, it reduces last minute substitutions and waste. Next slide. you know, as you're looking to expand upon your local purchasing, salad bars are a great way to highlight local items. You're not having to possibly purchase enough for every student in the district because you're putting it on your salad bar. It's a great way to feature unique items that students might not have been exposed to as a salad bar feature. Grain salads on salad bars are a great way to incorporate different local produce into a composed salad. Salad bars just really open up the first step as to expanding your local procurement. Next slide. So then there's different ways we can implement farm to school into more significant menu events. Rainbow days are a great event where you make a rainbow out of the salad bar. You get everyone encouraged. You typically hand out some type of goodie to the student as they build the rainbow from the salad bar. Um, Back to school barbecues or um, events around certain school programs are a great way to highlight local produce, local meats if you can get them. This is back to school barbecues are where I was had a lot of success working alongside our agricultural markets department in New York. Integrating local foods into any harvest and holiday celebrations in the school. And then, of course, building farm to school menu items into your seasonal cycle menus. And this other graphic highlights a USDA survey that was put out that shows the positive outcomes in implementing farm to school, with 61% saw increased consumption of fruits and vegetables, 57 saw an increase in access to better quality foods. And then what we all love is the 48% increase in the positive perception of school meals among the staff in school buildings. So it just shows how as you expand your local procurement, you're not just helping your local community, you're not just serving higher quality ingredients, you're really elevating the look of your program as a whole. Next slide. So when it comes to farm to school recipes, where can you draw inspiration? Where can you look to? Look on your menu now and see what are you serving that would easily be transitioned to a locally sourced item. What menu items can I switch to locally sourced that we're currently using, whether it's, you know, produce that's going into a stir fry, rather than just getting it from your broadliner, getting your onions and peppers from a local farmer. Work up to getting those proteins to add into your local procurement once you've, got your feet wet with getting used to sourcing from local farmers. Utilize products on your salad bars and your garden bars. Harvest of the month is a great way to, always have a monthly goal to use a certain product. And, the state agencies do such a great job building marketing materials that it's an easy lift to just, follow the harvest of the month schedule. If you have menu committees, start developing your own recipes. You can use social media. There's some great school food social media groups that are always sharing ways to highlight local produce in their programs. And then when you go to implement, like I said, you really want to purchase in advance. You want to do a lot of thoughtful planning. You want to utilize your equipment. Take advantage of those food processors, those sun-kissed sectionizers. You know, when you start talking with local procurement with staff, a lot of them get a little weary of the increased labor that they think there's going to be with using more unprocessed items. As if you can take advantage and utilize your small equipment, it really takes the stress and the lift off your staff, and you're able to bring in more local items and process them for your program. And then, market the heck out of what you're doing. You really want to tell your story to your community of your increase in local purchasing, and your engaging with the community to build your local procurement. So highlight on your menu every time you're using local items. Um, be strong in your social media awareness of your program and highlight what you're doing. On the lunchbox, we have farmer trading cards that you can modify to highlight the farmers you're using, and work on engaging with your local producers and bring them to school when you are using the items that you've procured from them. Next slide.
Wait, you said you had school today? Yeah?
So real the main takeaway really is you want to plan and forecast properly. This creates common ground with your farmers and producers. It gives them a chance to really give you the best offering they can, when you can tell them exactly how much you're going to need. And oftentimes it leads to maybe farmers have fields they haven't been utilizing, and they're able to grow specific crops for your program if you know exactly how much you're going to need. And it really creates a great vertical in your procurement. Um, when you found the local items you like, do your annual forecast on each item. Receive and review velocity reports annually, if not biannually, so you can see. And it's really great as you start to buy more local, when you see those local items showing higher and higher on your velocity report. It's really a testament to the hard work you're doing in your procurement. And always explore forward contracts with your established partner. Start planning ahead for the following year. Get ahead of the process once you're comfortable with it, because it really gives you a chance to build stronger relationships. Next slide. So how do we go about developing these new partnerships? Next slide. And here's some ideas, but the real answer is the possibilities are endless for developing new partnerships, and you don't know. Explore every opportunity because you don't know where it's going to lead. There's farm to school toolkits that identify farmers that you can purchase from. Farmers markets are a great way to put some feet to the pavement and meet local farmers and build relationships that way. Working through cooperative extension agents, farmer group cooperatives, tourism websites. That was what I did when I first started. I went to the county's tourism website and started looking at agro-tourism farms and just started cold calling farms to see who would be willing to work with me in schools. Talk to your other school districts, and there could be a district that's purchasing something local that you didn't know about, and build those relationships with other school districts. That's what I did with a local beef farmer. When I was a director, I heard another school district was buying hot dogs from this New York State processor. I reached out. Not only did I end up buying hot dogs from him, but I ended up buying ground beef. He custom formatted a hamburger patty for me. I was getting New York ground sausage, New York ground pork to make my own sausage. And it really turned into, I went from buying once every couple months to I was using his items weekly on my menu. And it was from just talking to another director locally that really brought that relationship. Next slide. So then so we're buying all this local stuff. How can we really, elevate this and provide more education to our students about local procurement and our local communities' agriculture? Next slide. So use your cafeteria as a classroom. If you're serving some fun new produce, highlight the nutritional benefits of the produce that you're serving. We have resources on the lunchbox that can help you with this. Highlight the farms where the items are coming from. If you can invite the farmer to come, be part of a taste test or be part of serving or just be part of the cafeteria experience for the students, it really is a full circle moments for your local procurement. Highlight your recipe inspirations. If you're featuring a recipe from a staff member, highlight that staff member and talk about where the concept for the recipe came from. If you're serving culturally relevant meals, provide information on the history or the genesis of the meal you're serving, and then highlight the nutritional benefits of the items that are in there. And utilize the Harvest of the Month features that your state agencies provide to help tell your story. Next slide. And then lastly, you're really going to want to really, solidify this and make it sustainable so it is always going on. You really want to implement the 3 C's of farm to school, and that's cafeteria, classroom, and community. If you're just doing it in the cafeteria, your efforts really don't go beyond your walls and your doors of your cafeteria. If there happens to be a farm to school program in your district, but you're not purchasing local, there's classroom education, but it stays in the classroom. And if the community's heavily involved, but it's not happening in the district, there's always this disconnect. So you really want to put these 3 C's together and find your champions in your district. Sorry. Find your champions who you can reach out to, and then engage your stakeholders. Let your school board know what you're doing. Let your district admin and tell the world on social media. Next slide. And hold on. Sorry, guys, take a drink. And that's everything I had for you. I don't know if there's time for questions. I just threw this slide in there. But thank you for the opportunity to talk about local procurement with you guys. Like I said, farm to school operations are a real big passion of mine, and excited to hear about you guys learning it in the apprenticeship program.
Thank you, Patrick. Julian, if you don't mind stopping to share a screen and we could do, I think we have about maybe 5 minutes or so for questions. So if anyone has questions, feel free to either raise your hand or drop them in the chat for Patrick. Anyone have a question? Feel free to put in the chat as well. Going once. Okay. Well, Patrick, it sounds like everyone fully understood everything you said. We'll also be sure to share your slides afterwards as well, because there's a lot of really great information on there. So appreciate you putting together such detailed slide decks. Oh, we do have a question in the chat. From Victoria. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges of working with local vendors? Great question.
One of the biggest challenges is them not understanding how school food and school districts conduct business. If they've been working with restaurants, usually the payment terms can be a challenge. Sometimes school districts only cut checks like once a month. So if you order something depending on when you place your order, they might not get a check for a certain amount of time. So being very open and honest with um, knowing how your school district pays their bills is a great good to know for a farmer. On the other hand, a great thing is, school districts are always going to pay their bills. So um, the payment might take a little bit longer, but the payment is much more reliable than a restaurant or a different entity. Um, I dealt with some times that local farmers had been burned by a school district where, they might have committed to buying local apples. This is a specific instance I had. I had an orchard 2 miles from my school district and I wanted to buy local apples. And I kind of told him how much I was going to buy. And he, really didn't want to extend me a price and told me I could order if I wanted. But the school district prior had told him that they would buy all the apples from him, and then they transferred money to DoD Fresh and started getting all their local apples through there. So he kind of had a bad taste in his mouth with working with his school. So it was a lot of relationship building. Um, but those would be like understanding the payment structure. And then it's also working with your district that maybe they can make some changes to their payment structure so that you can buy more local items. And it's also working with your school district to know what your micro purchase threshold is so that you know how much you can be purchasing from these local farms without having to do any formal bid process.
Thank you, Patrick. And not a question, more of a statement from Mark, but wanted to share out loud as well. Looks like Mark is catering a farm to school event Friday, highlighting all the local produce and products we use. So, Mark, that is very cool to hear. Okay, we have probably time for one more question if anyone else has any final questions for Patrick. And if you do have questions that come up later, feel free to share them as well. We have a comment in Spanish. Juliana, are you available to help translate?
Yes. So Elizabeth is wondering if she's asking about how she can obtain more information about salad preparation. So she specifically mentioned spinach and cucumbers and just getting more like recipes. I'm assuming this maybe ties into like the salad bar section. So just maybe like different resources for that.
Yeah, there's some great resources on the lunchbox for if you go to the sustainable um, education section of the lunchbox. There's everything you need to know about salad bar preparation, and there's some great spinach and cucumber recipes on the lunchbox as well. That would be my first go-to in finding all those.
Sorry, was having trouble finding my mute button. And then we have one, I think this will be our final question we take, so you have enough time for other speakers. But Heidi is wondering, is it hard to find local produce in the New York winters?
Yes, it was. A lot of butternut squash, a lot of winter squashes during the winter. Um, we were lucky. Our New York Ag and Markets did a lot with working with processors to increase their ability to process vegetables in New York for local schools to use. So there was a big food hub in central New York that actually did a lot with IQF processing of New York vegetables. So we had a steady supply of New York carrots, green beans, corn, peas throughout the winter through that IQF process. But a lot of potatoes, squashes. It definitely made salad bars tricky, highlighting New York State items. But we did a lot with, stews and roasts and things like that with the harder root vegetables we had available to us.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, I know Patrick, it's late for you, so we can let you go at this moment, but we appreciate
Uh,
you joining us in your evening, and we hope you have a good rest of your day. And then we'll just shift over to our new speakers.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, we're gonna shift gears a little bit, and we have Zach and Andrew here from our operations team. I know many of you have met Zach already. Andrew, I'm not sure if anyone's met you yet, so I don't know if you want to introduce yourself real quickly. And they'll be shifting gears to an activity that's actually not super related to farm to school, but we thought it'd be a fun addition to this call. So Andrew, I'll pass it to you.
Sure. My name's Andrew Gertis. This is the start of my fourth week at the Chef Ann Foundation as a school food operations specialist. I've been a chef in the food industry for at least a good 20 plus years across many different things, from restaurants to schools to private chefing, catering, you name it. Very, very excited to be here at Chef Ann's and get to work with all of you and hopefully see many of you at some of the schools I'll be going to.
And for all those new faces, I'm Zach Thomas. I'm a culinary operations specialist. I've been at Chef Ann for about a year now. And prior to this, I also worked in restaurants and extensively in research and development for most of my culinary career. And I'm super stoked to be with y'all here today. So with that, let me go ahead and share our screen. And we're going to get into a really fun topic that we wanted to go through with you guys. So can you see that? Okay. Let me make sure I can. There we go. Okay, so we're going to take y'all through a little bit of culinary math today. So just like the puppies jumping out of the back of this car, all of the culinary math processes are part of a bigger toolkit that's going to equip you to be super successful in your school food career. And we're going to talk a little bit about each one of those processes that you may be using in your school right now. So again, this is us. This is Andrew. I'm Zach. And we're going to get into our agenda. So what we're going to be talking about today is addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division as it relates to school food, fractions and decimals, another tricky thing related to school food that we're going to demystify for you today. Converting recipes and measurements, super important. A fun activity that Andrew's actually going to run y'all through called the Gallon Monster. Stay tuned. And we're going to go through scaling a recipe. And okay, so with our first math process, uh, and with all of them, I want you guys to go ahead and start dropping in the chat where you think you might see addition and subtraction in your everyday life in school food. But we're gonna go through a couple of examples that are the most common here. So first, you might find it in counting leftovers. So when you're serving your students, you may have a little bit of food left over. You're gonna add that up and put that in your production log, and that's one way you're gonna see addition come into play in school food. Taking inventory when you're counting all the things in your dry storage or in your walk-in to make sure that you have enough, or if you need to order, you know how much to order. Again, with that production record, when you're measuring those servings, like taking account of the remaining versus the amount you're prepared, to make sure that you know how much you've prepared and how much to adjust going forward if you need to. And then our next processes are multiplication and division. So you might find multiplication in scaling a recipe, which is making that recipe either larger if you need more or smaller if you need less. Figuring out a case size. So figuring out how many cases you might need to order for a certain item, for example, apples or burritos or any of the items you order into your kitchen. It might be double, so you multiply by two and so on and so forth. And then conversions. So when you need to go between units of measure for recipes, we're going to get into that a little bit later. Averages, so your cost per meal, that you'd find that by division. So you divide that whole number of meals by the number of meals that you produce to find that out. Ratios. So when you're preparing something, like if you have a vegetable mix, or if you have a greens mix, how much of each, as they relate to each other, is called a ratio. You might find that as well. And then again, our favorite word, conversions. You're going to see that a lot here. So we're going to talk about that and how to do it, and their best practices around them. So let's get right into that. So when we talk about scaling, we're going to talk first about a recipe conversion factor. Now, what you see here on the screen is our balsamic dressing recipe. And this is I believe, the 100 times recipe of our balsamic dressing. So if I needed to scale this recipe, that recipe conversion factor is what I'm multiplying or dividing that whole recipe by to produce my new quantity. So what also scales as you create a recipe, either up or down, is the equipment that you may use to produce it. So if I'm making this balsamic dressing for myself and my family of four, I may use a whisk. But if I'm making it for 500 kids, what I'm going to use is probably that big immersion blender that you have in your kitchens. Same deal with your soup. I might use a little stock pot on my stove at home, but when I'm making it for those 500 kids, I'm using that tilt skillet or I'm using a big kettle. So just keep in mind that when you scale a recipe, the equipment may change. The equipment you use may change as well. So what if so let's talk about scaling down. So if I only had 4.5 cups of oil to produce this recipe, I would have to produce less, right? So if you look here, you see the whole recipe uses 9 cups of oil. Now, 4.5 is half of 9. So I would divide this recipe by 2, but I wouldn't just divide one ingredient. I would divide all of these ingredients by 2. And if you know, just go ahead and drop in the chat. But the reason why we do this is because all of the ingredients are in proportion or a ratio to each other. So to end up with a recipe that tastes the same, looks the same as my original, I need to divide everything by 2. So I get a really, really close recipe to my original. Now let's talk about the opposite. So what if I had to double this recipe? So I would multiply by 2, or one of our other math processes. So I'd multiply everything by 2. Just like dividing by 2 to get a lesser amount, I would multiply by 2 so that, again, those ratios are staying the same. My recipe is going to taste the same, and I know exactly how much that I'm going to get out of this recipe. So that recipe conversion factor is super important whenever dealing with any recipe that you may use in your kitchen, because you're not always going to be making the same amount every day, right? So it's really important to keep that in mind. So if we're going from a serving like this, where it's really nice even number that we're multiplying by. So from 35 to 350, we're multiplying by 10. Super easy, right? But what if we want to go from 35 to 50? Now that gets a little bit trickier. So our recipe conversion factor is super important here. So how we get that recipe conversion factor is this. If we go down from 100 down to 80, we would do this. So we have the number of servings needed divided by the original number of servings, and that's what gives you that recipe conversion factor. That recipe conversion factor is the number that you're going to multiply or divide all of the ingredients in your recipe by. So for our first example, from uh, 35 to 50, we would have 50, which is the number of servings needed, over 35, which is our original, and we would get 1.43. So that's what we're multiplying everything in our recipe to get our new yield. And then for the second example, if we're scaling down from 100 to 80, we have 80, which is our number of servings needed, over 100, which is the original. So we would end up with a number that's less than 1. So that would be 0.8. And again, we're going to apply that to all of the ingredients in our recipe to get our new yield. So this is an example using the peach muffin from the lunchbox. And our original recipe serves 50. So this is an example of when we're going to scale down. So go ahead and drop in the chat what you think we should do, like for this recipe. All right. Let me give it a couple minutes. And then we're just gonna take a look at what this looks like when we scale down. So as you can see, like when we scale this recipe down, what's gonna happen is this. So you see all these numbers like on the right, as it's been scaled, this is how we get that. So we multiply everything by that recipe conversion factor that I just talked about, that magic number that gives you the same recipe, but smaller or larger. So that number of servings that we need, which is 20, over our original number of servings, which is 50. So 20 divided by 50 is 0.4. And we've multiplied everything by that. So you're going to see on the right that some things look a little funky, right? So some things are nice and clean, like the 1.2 pounds or the 6 ounces in the recipe. But you're going to see that there are going to be some kind of odd measures there. So that 0.4 tablespoons, that's not really an easy form of measure to calculate, is it, right? And that's because these are in two different types of measurement, weight and volume. So everything that you see in green is a really nice clean conversion, which is because it's done by weight, but which actually measures the heaviness of something. But volume actually takes into account how much space something takes up. So it's not always as clean. So what we recommend is to do it by weight. It makes recipes like this super, super easy to convert and saves you guys a ton of time. So as you can see, weight is super easy to scale. So let's get into fractions and decimals, which may be a little bit mystifying as well. So we've been converting all whole numbers so far, but what if you see something like this? 4 pounds and 4 ounces. And we need to convert all of this, either pounds or all in ounces, to get our recipe to another quantity. So remember that for every pound, there are 16 ounces. So 4 ounces divided by 16 ounces gives us this little fraction, 1/4, or 0.25, which is another way to express that second quantity, that 4 ounces. So what you could see in a recipe is 4.25 pounds or 4.25 pounds, just like this. Or we could convert it all to ounces. So there are 16 ounces in a pound, remember that. And then we have our 4 pounds. So 4 times 16 gives us 64 ounces. And then that second quantity, those 4 ounces, we just go ahead and add those on. So it could also read as 68 ounces. But when we're writing recipes, we always want to do it so that's easiest to read. So largest quantity possible. So more likely than not, you'd see that 4.25 pounds or 4.25 pounds. And now I'm going to hand it over to Andrew, and we're going to do a fun activity with you that shows you the relationship between those volume measures.
Yes. So as we go through this here, you're going to see what we like to call the gallon monster. So in the US, we have this lovely system, the imperial system: pounds, ounces, feet, inches, yards. We're suckers to tradition, so that has been the system that you'll see a lot in a lot of kitchens still, and in a lot of restaurants and things like that in this country. However, some of you may be familiar with metric, milliliters, liters, kilograms, grams, that sort of thing. Don't get me started. It's a way better system, and many restaurants and things are starting to convert to that. And I would strongly encourage all of you to, push that through in your own kitchens and utilize that when you can. But you are going to need to be familiar with both. So we'll go through that, and it comes with experience. There's charts like these that you can put in your kitchen so that the information's readily at hand. And as you get experience using these measures, it'll start to become second nature. So our gallon monster starts with a gallon, 1 gallon, like the milk you buy at the grocery store. In every gallon, we have 4 quarts, so it divides evenly into 4 individual quarts. Each quart can be split into 2 pints, so 2 of those pint glasses in every quart. Each pint is the same as 2 cups. So again, we divide it by 2, we get 2 cups. Each of those cups can be divided into fluid ounces, so 8 ounces per cup. And then we can divide those ounces down further. We get tablespoons, 2 tablespoons, and then each of those tablespoons divided into 3 teaspoons. So again, you'll see all these different numbers being thrown around. 3 teaspoons in 1 tablespoon, 2 cups into a pint, 4 quarts into a gallon. It can quickly get confusing as you see kind of our monster has branched out every way. So again, through time and repetition, you'll get a handle on these. But until then, have yourself a chart in your kitchen just like this. So, when the question arises, oh, how many quarts are in a gallon? Boom, you can look, and it's right there in front of you. Again, with your metric system, it's real easy because everything divides into 10. So you can see how it kind of gets out of hand in a hurry. So again, take a look. How many cups in a pint? 2, 4 quarts in a gallon, and cups in an entire gallon. 16 ounces in a cup, 8 tablespoons in a cup, 16, and teaspoons. Again, you have to multiply by 3, you get 48. And again, you can see it divided just as Zach was talking about into fractions. We can take a look at that and divide it up all into fractions, with gallon being our 1 here. So you'll see, again, it gets very weird. Take a look at the teaspoons. 768 teaspoons in a gallon. Who is going to remember that offhand? Almost no one. So again, when you're getting used to this, have that chart handy in your kitchen, because you'll see some of these things. You probably won't see one 768th teaspoon in a recipe, but you could see, a 16th of a cup, or, 1/16. Why do we do these measurement conversions? So it's really important when you're doing your recipe, take the time, like Zach was walking you through, to really convert all of those measurements into the same thing so that when you go to execute the recipe, you're able to save time. You can, make sure you've got the right amounts of everything right from the get-go, so you're not running around your kitchen for things and having to measure on the fly. You're going to improve your accuracy. So if you've got it all converted to the same units and you're using those same measures, there's less chance you're going to make a mistake, because it can be really easy, especially when you're cooking for the number some of you are. Some of you might be cooking for 1,000 kids in a day, and you miss one number off and suddenly you're 200 portions off of where you should be. And then along with that, maintaining consistency. So we make it this Wednesday the same, and the next Wednesday, and the next Wednesday, and it starts with those measurement conversions. And then how do we do that? So using, like Zach was talking about, the least number of measures for a volume, like 4¼ gallons, rather than the, 100 some odd ounces to it. Keep your measures consistent. Make sure, if you're doing everything in cups, keep them all in cups. And then scaling that recipe up or down appropriately. If it's for 50, let's scale it right from the get-go for 50, rather than, I'm going to on the fly measure the first thing and scale that to 50 and then measure the next. No, do it all at the start. And as he mentioned briefly, there's huge advantages to doing this by weight. And some of you may have jobs in professional kitchens outside of your school district or whatever it may be. You'll often see professional restaurant kitchens utilizing the scale that you see on your screen on the right. Really, really makes life easy when you're trying to scale recipes. The precision it can get to, when you're using especially a digital scale and you weigh something to 100 grams or 8 ounces, the next time you do that recipe and you measure that flour, it's going to be exactly that number. The way you scoop flour out of a bin might be different than the way the next cook scoops. So you get that precision with weight. Again, like I mentioned, the accuracy of it, just consistency of execution in there, how you're scooping your flour, how you're pouring things, which measure you're using. And infinitely easier to scale. You're going to be able to get really precise, but you're also, when you're using the scale, take a look at that bowl on the right. You can put all of those ingredients into the same bowl and you zero it out after each one, and you've used one bowl for your dishwasher to wash instead of a whole range of different measuring spoons and cups and all those sorts of things. So it just makes life easier. Like we said, easier cleanup. Happy dishwasher is a happy kitchen. And boom. Lots more to talk about in the math area, but for now, we've mastered it. So take a look here. What is, and you can drop some of these things into the chat or raise a hand. What is one reason you'd convert measurements in a recipe? Pick any.
Yep, to scale the recipe. Great one, Heidi. Consistency, accuracy. Awesome, Heather. Anything else? Those are pretty great.
Pretty
right?
solid. Pretty solid. And then what we just talked about, and as a chef, this is like key. When you can really convince yourselves to start using that scale, life will become easier. So what are some of those advantages to using weight? Again, go ahead and throw those in the chat, raise a hand, whatever you're more comfortable with. Yes, margin of error. And again, as we mentioned, that's such a huge deal. When you're cooking for so many people, one tiny error really gets magnified. So, if you're cooking for 1,000 and you're 200 short, that's 200 kids that are missing out on something. So you want to make sure you're really accurate, and the scale is the best way to do that. Yes.
Yep, Isa. Recipes are easier to read and understand, especially if they're in the same unit of measure. It just makes everyone's life so much easier.
And I like the comment reduces food waste. So
Mhm.
again, you know, if everybody's scooping that flour a little bit different and say, cook B and C, take just a tiny bit more, but we've scaled that recipe up for 1,000 people, suddenly a little bit of flour becomes a lot of flour. You're paying for that. That's waste. Excellent. Really good answers. Cool. So it looks like we have just a few minutes here, but this is a chance to, we're going to throw out some questions here. Great for discussion. Um, that's where you really make those connections about scaling and those sorts of things. So I'd love to hear, what sorts of recipes have you scaled in your kitchen, and what were some of those challenges? Um, just as an example, I'll throw out, like Zach was talking about, it changes the kind of equipment you may need to use. So again, if you're making that dressing for 4 people and you had a whisk, suddenly you got to make it for 1,000 people. You're going to throw your arm out trying to whisk it for 1,000. So suddenly now maybe you have to buy a new piece of equipment. Okay, any other ideas?
Ooh,
Yeah.
meatballs. Ooh, that's fun. Mac and cheese, orange chicken. Ooh, those are some tricky ones too, especially with that cheese sauce.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like you got to make sure your numbers are right, because otherwise you can end up with something that's a little bit gloopy when it was supposed to be creamy and delicious. Like we've all been there where we've all add just a little bit too much flour, and our sauce goes a
Right.
little bit too thick. It's not fun, but it's always fixable. So like we've all had a little bit of a scaling horror story too. Like I know, like one time, I was scaling a recipe in a professional kitchen, and I think it was a gumbo recipe, and this was the first time I did it. And I put in all the pepper that the recipe called for, and for example, pepper is one of those ingredients where the flavor doesn't scale to the exact amount that you're adding, right? Like, so I ended up with a really, really spicy gumbo that I just had to just like wipe my mouth out and just throw a whole ton of sour candy in there to kind of wipe it away. And then just remake the recipe. So there are some things that you may encounter that don't really scale linearly like that. Like everything that has a really strong flavor, like some things you might see in your kitchen are
Yeah.
like garlic or chili
Spicy.
powder or even herbs like oregano and cilantro. You may find that you might need to play with your recipe a little bit as you scale it. Like so, just when you're doing that, just keep that in mind that some things are going to work exactly, but some things, especially things like salt or anything that has a larger flavor impact than the amount that you're using, you need to be really careful with.
Mhm. I love I'm seeing in the chat a couple people had mentioned mac and cheese being a particular challenge, and that makes total sense because when you're making that cheese sauce, if you're making a scratch made one with a roux with flour, a little bit off in the flour really changes a large amount of end product. So an extra cup of flour or missing a cup of flour can really throw that off. So again, going back to using weight in there instead of a volume measure can really help you with that consistency.
Oh, Tahara, that's a great example. You see this, Andrew? Like
Mm-hmm.
the rice, like for the orange chicken. This is a killer
Mm-hmm.
example because uh things that grow, like in the kitchen, especially rice, or something to be really, really mindful of. Because you sometimes end up with double or sometimes two and a half the amount of rice that you start with. So just keeping an eye on those kinds of ingredients that scale a little bit irregularly, like rice, like pasta,
Mm-hmm.
or even some grains that other grains that you might use, like quinoa. Like you really want to keep a close eye on those and test it. when you scale it, so you have a better idea of what you're going to end up with. Killer example. That's a really, really good one.
Yeah, yeah. And along with that, as a suggestion, make sure, hey, mistakes are going to happen in kitchens. Make sure you write those things down in your production notes and stuff for that day. So the next time you go to do that, you make sure you don't make that same mistake. Make sure we're measuring the rice. You know, what we did last time, we're not going to do that the next time. Yeah, I'm seeing some great horror stories in there.
Oh, this horror story is good.
Yeah, yeah,
This Tabasco one, oh,
yeah.
that's great. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't think you want to put 12 bottles in
Yeah.
a five gallon recipe of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
recipe. But hey, we all love spice a little bit,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, so you can end up with something like that if you're not reading the recipe, which is another thing that we may get into in another virtual learning session. But yeah, just paying really close attention to the units of measure in that
Yes.
recipe is vital in
Yeah.
every recipe. Just when you're reading through it, don't read too fast. Like, and make sure you read it twice
Yes.
and make sure you understand what's
Yeah.
going on in
And
that recipe.
excellent point. I think Jessica just put
Mhm.
in there to, often in recipes you'll see a line for notes. That's where you put those mistakes and things to be mindful of in there. So yeah, making sure you read those recipe notes. Cool. And then I think before we lock, my favorite horror story for me personally is we had an Indian recipe once at a school I worked at where we cooked for 700 people. And not necessarily an error in the measuring or scaling, but then in how it was then cooked. So the recipe called for 5 gallons of pureed onion, which, if you were doing this for 4 people and cooking a little bit of pureed onion in a pan, it wouldn't be a problem. But when you dump 5 gallons of pureed onion into a really hot 40-gallon tilt skillet, all that onion goes up into the air. It was like dropping a tear gas bomb. We all had to leave the
Ooh,
kitchen for a good hour and let it air out. So just those things to be aware of.
okay. Y'all, thank you so much for sharing all your kitchen horror stories and sharing your trauma with us.
Yes,
Like
that's how
together
we
we're
learn.
all gonna heal.
We learn from
Like
each other's
so
mistakes.
so thank you. And if you have any other stories, please share them with us. We love hearing them. And if we're in your kitchens, we'd love to help you with them when we're on site. I believe we are at time. So I'm going to stop sharing, but thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us. And it's been our pleasure to present to you today.
Thank you, Zach. That was super fun. Appreciate that presentation. And I love all these stories in the chat. Sounds like a lot of people have a lot of horror stories. So, well, that is all we have for you today. Apologize we went a little bit over, but the only housekeeping item I have today is just a reminder that our next virtual learning session is November 5th. So we will see you all then, but I hope everyone has a great rest of your evening and we'll talk soon. Thank you all.
Have a
Bye.
great night. Bye.
Nice to meet you.